The Eephus pitch is kind of a rare pitch, but it's so much slower than your average pitch that it kind of completely throws off the batter. As it's described in the film, it's something that stops time or that catches the batter off guard. And I think the film is on a larger level trying to do that in terms of your expectations with baseball films. And it's also trying to get you to slow down and see the Eephus pass. And, not just swing and miss.
When is a baseball movie more than just a movie about baseball? As told by Carson Lund in his debut film, Eephus, it's a chance to explore themes of escape, of camaraderie, and of a deep sense of time passing. Named after a rarely deployed curveball, the Eephus pitch, Eephus is set in suburban New Hampshire where that stubbornly independent New England mindset informs the players as they face change and gentrification. The film uses a mix of comedy and drama for both the baseball connoisseur and for anyone who's ever lamented their community slipping away. Eephus is a baseball story that uses a non-traditional narrative and one that leaves you with the feeling of a lazy afternoon tuned to the rhythms of America's eternal pastime. Opening in theaters, having premiered at Directors Fortnight at Cannes. Please join us as we sit down with director Carson Lund on Inside the Arthouse, starting now.
Hi, my name is Greg Lemley.
And I'm Raphael Sparge.
And welcome to another episode of Inside the Arthouse. Spring is in the air, the flowers are starting to bloom, the sun's setting a little bit later. And for those of you who follow the Grapefruit or Cactus League, baseball is in the air. So it's a perfect time, to welcome to Inside the Arthouse, Carson Lund. He's the director of a new film called Eephus. Welcome, Carson.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So I'm going to start with this one. Are baseball movies about baseball?
Usually not. I would argue that this film is about baseball on one level. Typically, the canon of baseball films, there are all these movies about using the game as a metaphor for something else. It's usually like typically one or two characters and their transformation. They're kind of coming-of-age stories that use baseball as just a vehicle. This is a film that attempts to emulate and capture the flow of a baseball game, the feeling of playing a baseball game and spectating on a baseball game. It captures the kind of the rhythm and the poetry of the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is no doubt. It feels like what it feels like to be playing a game. I mean, it's a sort of astounding sense of sort of float, and there's like nothing happening and everything happening, as you reference in the script. It's remarkable what you're able to kind of create on film as it relates to the feeling of a baseball game.
Well, thank you. Yeah. It's an odd thing to want to structure a film around, but I've been playing in rec leagues for years in Los Angeles. I'm from New Hampshire, but I moved to Los Angeles and I joined these adult rec leagues, and I really found something really special about this group of teammates that I play with and the kind of relationship that we build on that field that only exists on that field. And I mean, we move around in Los Angeles, but there are certain fields that we return to. And I felt like there was something so special about it that I wanted to capture it and bottle that feeling in a film. It speaks a lot to the age we're in and the kind of like impatience that most people have towards these activities that are just kind of about nothing. They are quote unquote boring, or but they mean everything to the people involved in them. The lulls of baseball are really crucial, I think, in an age that's getting increasingly quicker and more like our attention's more divided and distracted and all of this stuff.
Sure. No, attention span's a major issue. It's an issue with, people learning how to appreciate movies, even younger people, obviously, as they're trained on, a movie is a 30-second thing on TikTok.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, and it's a factor for the game, I guess, in some respects. Obviously, baseball, trying to increase the pace of the game and make it more like some other sports. But there's, something inherently beautiful about, what the pace of a baseball game is. And, do we need to train ourselves, whether it's baseball or something else, to appreciate something that, evolves a little more slowly?
I would say yes. It reminds us that we're human. It's not healthy to be divided between 2 or 3 or 4 spheres of activity all at once. I was just walking here and I was in a bit of a rush actually to get back. And I was checking my email and checking my Instagram all while walking through the streets of New York. And that's too much of our lives. It's important to slow down and be aware of time passing, of nature around us, of our relationships with the people that are in our lives. And I think this film is kind of like an invitation to do that.
So can I just ask, I mean, you have a lot of characters, you have a lot of different sort of storylines going on. Obviously the game is kind of the thrust of the story. How did you set out to write this? Clearly it's not classic sort of story structure, as it were. It has a sort of almost a documentary feel. I mean, how did you get it on the page, and then how did you translate that into the screen?
Yeah, I wrote this with two very close friends, Nate Fisher and Michael Basta. Michael, I've grown up with from my hometown in New Hampshire, so we've made movies together forever. So it's like kind of the other half of my brain. And then Nate is someone I met years ago. Well, I should say I met him in LA, but we had been going to the Harvard Film Archive for years. We're the only people under the age of 50, with one other person, maybe one or two, and we would be at the theater, but we didn't really meet each other then, and we kind of met each other later. And I started describing this idea, and he was very drawn to it and found things about baseball funny that I also find funny. And it was just a really a great fit. And we started writing this film, collaboratively during the pandemic, mostly on Zoom, actually, which sounds difficult, but it was a real kind of balm for the soul at that point. We were all craving like outdoor activity and social activity, and I think this was our outlet for it, was to sit there in the Zoom room and imagine what this film might be. It was always there from the beginning that this would be an unconventional structure, that we would adopt the flow of a baseball game to tell this story, and it would be 9 innings, and we would try to account for every moment of time that passes in a baseball game. There was a very pure concept at the beginning that we thought might actually run, 4 or 5 hours. That like the film might be very long, actually. And we realized, of course, we can't do that. We shouldn't do that. Let's try to capture the essence of that and make you feel the time passing without actually being that long. So we kind of wrote the film out in tandem with the script. We were sort of writing this box score and imagining what might happen in the game and what the lineups look like and where people play and what kind of guys are first basemen versus center fielders versus pitchers. And, just like starting from, it was a very fun brainstorming exercise to just think about, these, like the top-down graphics on baseball broadcasts, like of all the faces of the players around the field, and just thinking about, okay, let's do that, but for like a suburban rec league. What are the kind of guys that we've played, or that I've played with, or that they have observed going to rec games, or the kind of people on my dad's teams.
Yeah. So
yeah, it kind of all began there, and we knew it wasn't a sensational baseball game or anything like that, but we needed to have a couple moments of action that were interesting. And then sort of from there, we decided, where can we diverge from the game? Where can we show the sidelines? It offered a really nice structuring element for telling a story, because we knew we had 9 innings, 3 outs per half inning, and there's a lot of playfulness you can get across in that space.
Right, but it's framed within the structure of, there's that overarching thing, which is that the field is going away. And when was that element added, and sort of elegiac component?
Yeah. That was there
Spoiler
from the beginning
alert,
as well.
guess.
Yeah, no, it's right there in the synopsis.
Yeah.
Everyone knows going into the film what's happening, and the characters know what's happening.
Yeah.
We knew early on that was the theme, the narrative, emotional crux of the film. We were thinking less about the canon of baseball films than we were about these sort of like sunsetting films, of which there are a small handful of great films that have been made throughout American cinema and world cinema, like Prairie Home Companion by Robert Altman, or The Last Picture Show by Bogdanovich, or The Last Night at the Alamo, Eagle Pennell. And then I would say like the biggest inspiration for me was Goodbye Dragon Inn by Simon Liang, who the Taiwanese filmmaker who makes this film about the closing of a cinema. Mm-hmm. I should also know Taiwanese Malaysian cinema. And the way that film is structured is so beautiful. Like the container for this story is the screening of this film, Dragon Inn, at this hallowed cinema that's closing down, and he moves around the theater and shows the few people in the theater and the people who work there and the ghosts that occupy the kind of the margins of the screen. I thought that was a great way to tell my own story about kind of like the waning popularity of baseball, which is another huge 20th century pastime that is now in a sort of crisis state.
As you can see, Greg knows a little bit about baseball. He dressed just for the part.
No, yeah. This is how I dress every day.
He's more the expert in that conversation than I am, for sure.
No, look, I actually never played the game really. As a kid, I went to one of my older brother's games and saw someone get hit by a pitch, and it was like, I'm not playing that game.
Yeah.
And played other sports, but baseball was not something I played. And I came to baseball later on as just a fan. At college, the Diamond was right on campus, and if you had a spring athletic card, you could watch, go see games for free. And a good friend who had played in high school would come join me, and you'd start learning the nuances of the game. I can appreciate playing, but I really appreciate the film because it is about sort of watching and observing and seeing the little things that happen out on the field.
Yeah, I do. I think there are similarities between cinephilia and extreme baseball fandom. The categorizing and the stat keeping. There are similarities between these two worlds, and the way that fans might develop an appreciation of a certain player, or cinephiles might develop an appreciation of an auteur, and see how that career progresses. And yeah, then sort of like the idea that we're looking for things in the game or in the film that are nuances that the average observer might not pick up on, and we're trying to sort of wax poetic about why those things are the crux of it.
Yeah, how the team works, because when this cinematographer works with that filmmaker, it comes out this way, but with a different director, the films look different. So I definitely get that, and certainly also one of my sons, is still playing. Came back after playing in high school, took off for a few years, and he's playing adult rec leagues. And so watching him play, being able to watch him play again, but also to see how it's different, how different the adult rec league kind of experience is from little league or high school or whatever. The variety of ages, to see someone out there who's my age, who's still playing, and next door to a kid who's just out of college. I mean, that's you really capture that, and that's very real, and and there's something beautiful about it when you're watching it both live and the movie, because these are people that they just love this and they don't want to give it up.
Yeah, it's hanging on.
They literally don't want to leave, right? Yeah,
it's hanging on to some childhood joy that they feel has otherwise been lost in their lives. That's not true of every character per se, but I think for me, certainly, I tap into something when I go out there and play on the field that feels very freeing and very pure. That I don't experience in other parts of my life. So I definitely think that's what's very unique about adult rec league versus when I was younger and I played. It was very stressful, a lot of pressure about competing and getting to the next level and making sure you're in the weight room. And now there's like the sense of humor that everyone shares.
As long as they don't get hurt.
Yeah, the failing of their own bodies. I mean, everybody's laughing about that. And so there's a humility to it. And everyone knows they're there for the love of it, and not winning and packing the stat sheet or anything, because no one's coming to hire these guys to be in the majors. So
right,
it's really freeing to play in one of these leagues. And I think the film's about more than just a baseball league. It's about any sort of activity that people have as an outlet for this kind of freedom or this unadulterated joy.
Well, I wonder. Look, I played Little League. I played some ball up until about 7th or 8th grade, in school, and I always loved it. But I'm not a baseball person. Certainly not like Greg is, and like you are. But I'm aware of the fact that this film played at Cannes, and unusual for an American indie to play at Cannes. And I just wondered what for potentially people who may not understand this American pastime how to play. How does this play for for non
people who have no knowledge
aficionados? Yes, right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why it is, but with sports films especially, there's always this expectation that people need to know the sport to be interested in the film. But we don't say the same thing about period costume dramas. I'm not interested in that world per se, but I like films about that world. I think sometimes we don't know the rituals and customs and languages of the films we watch. We don't know it intimately, but we're interested in the humanity on screen, and like vicariously experiencing some other setting or some other culture, subculture. It's funny. I get this question a lot, and I totally understand it because baseball's so deeply American. But I think people approach it as just another film abroad. They see it as this is a world that I don't know, but I can connect to. And I think people have seen the themes of mortality and aging and camaraderie, male bonding, that all comes across without understanding every word or what a shortstop is or what a 3-2 count is. People don't even really know what's going on in the game sometimes, or the ending of it catches them off guard because they didn't know we were in the ninth inning, or they didn't know the bases were loaded. And I'm okay with that because I think it's more about foregrounding the game as this ritual and not as this like competition that we need to be leaning on every moment in the progression of it. So I think somewhere deep down there's also a fascination in French culture towards Americana, and maybe that factored into its inclusion in the Cannes Film Festival. But but also I kind of knew I was making a film that was about America, but in a formal language that maybe is not typical of American independent cinema, that might actually be a little more indebted to European art cinema and Asian art cinema.
Or in this case, and he factors into the film, is Fred Wiseman. I mean, I remember his film about, the boxing gym, which kind of, you just sort of go in and you're there and there's no linear aspect to it. You just sort of, you feel it,
very observational,
taste it, and you're there, and you're sort of, it's more than a fly in the wall, but anyway, the point is that it feels more like your film feels more verite or almost documentary-like in its portrayal.
Yeah. I want it to be a itinerary of all these details and feelings and characters and impressions. I think that's certainly why I included Fred, whose films are he's like the preeminent chronicler of American subcultures, institutions, and locations, really. Like, he goes in there and he observes it from every angle, without necessarily an agenda. And yet, by the end of his films, this grand kind of design becomes apparent. There's a eureka moment that you feel all this emotion and all this architecture to the film, So I was really, really inspired by that. But of course, I'm making a fiction, so it's a little bit different. But
no, right, of course. I mean, you've sort of you've split the baby, as it were. You're both, but it definitely feels inspired. He does voiceover as well, I guess, on this as well. How did you connect with Fred, or what was that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I forgot you hadn't actually mentioned that, but yeah,
he's more than just an inspiration. He's actually in the film.
He's in the movie, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why I wanted him in the film. I wanted it as a little nod to the cinephiles who are fans of Wiseman's work. Yeah, I actually originally had him slated to be in the film. I mean, I reached out to him and sent him the script, and he was very interested. He has this desire at this point to be in all these. To have a sort of like minor acting career. He's been in a few films recently, which I think is very charming. So he wanted to. I had him read for the character Franny, the scorekeeper, in the film, and he lives in Paris, and it just didn't work out scheduling wise. Later on, I started to implement this radio narration throughout the film in a kind of Altman-esque mode. And that wasn't actually part of the original script. It was a way to kind of hint at the outside world, because this is such an insular film, and I wanted to give a sense of what this town is like, contextualize it, and also shoehorn in some narrative plot stuff. So yeah, I brought him in there at the very beginning of the film as a voice. We wrote a few scripts for him. He read a number of number of great lines, and he's also from the region, so it's a regional voice, it's a folksy voice. I think it's the right voice for this world, but it's also, like you said, doubles as kind of like a nice reference.
Yeah, insider baseball, right? Yeah.
I was going to suggest we take a look at a clip from the film, just so people can get a sense of the picture.
Hey, Wilton, check this out. Pizza, hot, fresh pizza, sausage, onions,
marinara,
extra cheese,
white Alfredo sauce.
All
right, wait for yours, D. All right, D. Green peppers,
extra cheese,
portobello mushrooms, pulled pork,
hot, fresh pizza,
Parmesan cheese, macadamia nuts, pine nuts.
yeah, dude.
Not a lot wrong with that one, D.
Meatballs, sir. Lasagna.
Tabacoo. Soprasa.
I'll crack your nose, kid.
Fellas.
Right through that damn mask.
Time. Fellas. Am I in a deli? Is this a meat market? Am I selling you ham? Cut the shit and play.
You like pizza on ham?
Pizza on ham? Ham on pizza. Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's great. It's fun to see even a second time. The casting is incredible.
It's fun. It's competitive.
You're
and they all know each other.
It's
pushing buttons, man.
You obviously you read people. You look for people. Maybe how did you find them? And then what did you? I mean, you must have all went out and played some baseball together. Like what? How did you create this connection that you have? These guys really know each other.
Yeah, and a lot of them did know each other. I cast from the local Boston pool of actors. I went to casting websites and probably looked at hundreds of different actors. And, I'm looking for a certain face that feels regionally authentic and right for the character and matches the kind of face we had in mind for that player in that position. And then also a certain voice, and we had them read, but another huge factor is I had to ask them if they had baseball experience and how recently have they played, and so I made sure that there was some history with the game, and then once we got out there for rehearsals, the rehearsals really were like baseball practices. I still play, so it's like
to see that.
Yeah, honestly, before we started doing scenes, we were running drills essentially. I'm not like a drill sergeant per se, but I would hit him ground balls and fly balls, and we'd do batting practice, and we just get used to each other on the field. So I think once you start going through the motions of playing baseball, it's something that a lot of American guys can relate to because they played at some point in their life. Not just guys, actually. Everyone played, t-ball or something at some point in their lives. So you get out there and it's sort of, you remember it, and you get loose, and it sort of takes the self-consciousness away, and it takes the pressure off. So we didn't do that many rehearsals, but we did enough for people to feel comfortable with each other. And then what really happened was over the course of the shoot, people got very close, and the chemistry really, really increased because they were there on the field every day with each other, and they were living in a cabin in the woods, like a Boy Scout camp in the woods together. A bunch of grown men living in the woods, 30 minutes from the field, which I know could have been disastrous, but was also part of my strategy to build these bonds so they would look like players who'd been playing for years together. So.
Did the two teams? Did they sleep separately?
No, they all stayed. They all stayed together, which I think is okay because it's appropriate because in a league like this, you will play the same team over and over again. I mean, I think the way I conceived it was like this is a small league where there's probably 6 teams or something, and these are just 2 of them. So they play other teams as well, but this is a makeup game. So we wanted to decrease the stakes as much as possible. This is a makeup game that they just had on the schedule that they pushed to the end of the season. It's the last time they're going to play here. So they all know each other well. Yeah. We shot this in October 22. 1 month about 4 weeks. We did a bunch of overnights at the end of the month when all the leaves had fallen down. And just given the nature of the film, the fact that it's kind of a real-time exercise, more or less, and that a lot of this is framed in master shots where you can see the left fielder in the background. I had most of the cast there for the whole month. I had to kind of like get them to fully buy in to this social experiment. Yeah, and it's 4 months of a bunch of guys hanging out on a field together, and it's the most fun I've ever had on a film set for sure.
Oh my God, it's got to be. What I love, particularly because of the nature of the story that you tell, is that you didn't go out and find recognizable actors to play parts, because everyone had that same kind of, they lived in the neighborhood kind of vibe. And even though they're actors who could have played the heck out of that, you kind of really stayed with a kind of a collection of faces and personalities that felt so rooted in place.
Well, thank you. I mean, part of that is we didn't have access to any major A-listers, we didn't have enough money to pay those people. So we had to cast this from the local pool. Yeah, that's certainly a big part of it. But also I love films where you don't recognize the people. I like them to feel new, like novel for that film. I love Robert Bresson's idea of like actors as people that should be in one film and then not work. I think I want to work with these guys again, but I like that philosophy that the person is very unique to the film. They are the soul that drives the film. It's I really wanted just people that felt true to the region and the kind of faces you see in like John Cassavetes films in the 70s, and you don't really see in many films anymore.
You talked about looking at their ability to play baseball. So I kind of have to ask you, in other baseball movies, do you get upset sometimes at certain actors who clearly cannot play the game? And conversely, are there situations where it's like you look and say, yeah, he looks pretty good out there. Actually, I can buy him as a baseball player.
Yeah, like Kevin Costner, I can buy him. He's got a good swing. I think that a lot of the baseball films they try to skirt around that, by using montage to cut around the deficiencies of the play. And I think in this film, we had license to not bother with that because I embraced that these were amateurs.
Embrace the idea that some of them aren't the best athletic shape right now.
Yeah. And I want to see the whole play develop, and I want to see all the bodies moving in frame. And I think there's a sense of comedy in that. But yeah, I find it, I want to see a play develop because I think the baseball is a very beautiful game, and I think baseball films that are about the major leagues or semi-professional leagues, there's too much montage, and so you can kind of see the seams and you can see that the players aren't really up to speed. Here, you just embrace that they're not up to speed, and we don't shy away from showing that.
No.
That's again part of the humanity, and that's the story you're telling, which is basically these men facing, pardon me, not just the end of where they play the field, but also looking at the end of their careers as a baseball player, or their own life cycle and everything else. I mean, that's where you tell the story, which is beyond just the baseball, outside the diamond, as it were. And clearly that was very conscious on your part.
Well, there's another element of that, which is also the pitch. The title of the film is named after the Eephus Pitch. It's a great leveler. Can we run the clip? And we're just gonna have it in the background while we talk over it. But
I'd love for you to explain, Carson, maybe just to kind of explain to people what
let's look at one
learn
first.
About it in the film. Maybe you can just sort of explain what the Eephus Pitch is, and we'll try and show it at the same time.
Yeah, it's the Eephus Pitch is kind of a rare pitch at this point. I mean, it's always been a rare pitch. It's kind of like an endangered species at this point, though, within the game. I mean, it's something a pitcher can have in their arsenal, but they don't throw very often. Nowadays, if you see it, it's usually because a position player came in and just to mop up the last few innings of a game. But it's so much slower than your average pitch that it kind of completely throws off the batter. And it derives from Eephus, which is a Hebrew term for avoid or nothing.
Nothing.
So it's not
Zero.
something that's thrown with any particular sauce. It's just the best practitioners of the Eephus maybe look like they're throwing a fastball, and then they deliver this 45-mile-per-hour looper. And Bill Lee, who's in the film, famously threw this pitch. It was inspired by Rip Sewell, who invented it in the early 1900s. So yeah, it's just it's a nothing pitch, but it's part of the game nonetheless, and it's not thrown very often. But it as it's described in the film, it's something that stops time or that catches the batter off guard. And I think the film is on a larger level trying to do that in terms of your expectations with baseball films, and it's also trying to get you to slow down and see the Eephus pass, and not just swing and miss.
The idea there's something in nothing.
Why is it not thrown very much anymore? I mean, is it just become sort of gone out of fashion?
It was never really in fashion. I mean, it's not a pitch that requires much expertise. I mean, guys are throwing 100 miles an hour, and then they have a nasty breaking ball that's in the low 80s. Like, they got enough in their arsenal. They don't really need to do that.
I'm thinking of the line from Bull Durham. I have to announce my presence with authority. I mean, there's you get all these A-types, and they just want to they want to beat the other person. The pitcher wants to beat the batter, and it's like no, they just I'm going to throw as soft as I can.
It's kind of a comical pitch, and there's a level of clownishness to it. And actually, I should note that Zach Greinke, the great pitcher, who I believe is still in the league,
and he's still throwing the Eephus.
Yeah, he throws it periodically, but he's known as this character, Actually, Nate Fisher, my co-writer, who's in the film and is the one who gives the monologue about the Eephus, he was modeling his character after Zach Greinke. And he had some lines that Greinke had used in press conferences, and we sort of took him a few degrees away from the reality and added them to the script. So it's very Greinke coded. But yeah, he's one of the few pitchers that will still pull that thing out occasionally.
Indeed. And Bill Lee and Bill Lee is still pitching, by the way. I mean, which is amazing. I guess he's showing up with the Savannah Bananas every once in a while and things like that.
Yeah. He does pitch occasionally for the Savannah Bananas. I was just with him all last week because we were touring the film through the New England region, and he came out and supported it and was in Q&As and talked about, he talks about how he's died 2 times on the field. He's had heart attacks. One of which was right before we shot Eephus, but he has risen for the movie. And he wants to pass away on the field because it's what he loves the most. And he's really an incredible person and such a performer. And actually, we'd written lines for him, but he came out there and kind of put it all in his own words. And I think it completely works. But yeah, he still throws quite a bit, which is very surprising. And he's in his upper 70s at this point. Wow. But he still gets batters out.
I can give you 3 outs.
Yes. My friend likes to comment on the "I can get you 3 outs" line. It has this sort of mystical quality that he just keeps saying it, repeating it. It's like a mantra,
You were generous in praising Costner, but not calling anybody else out. So that's fine. But favorite baseball movies or ones that, you really dislike?
Well, I haven't seen any baseball movies in a long time, actually. I haven't gone back and rewatched The Sandlot or Field of Dreams, which are 2 films that Eephus gets compared to quite a bit. But I haven't seen them in a while, so I can't really speak to those. I do like Bull Durham. I love Costner in that film. It's not really a movie about
a baseball.
It's a movie about sex and human relationships. I like Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars.
That's a good one.
I think that has an incredible sense of location shooting, and it's very funny. I love the James Benning film, American Dreams Lost and Found, which is a fascinating avant-garde film that uses kind of the Hank Aaron baseball cards as a starting point. There's so many. Everybody Wants Some, I think, is a great film. Also not really a baseball film. It's about the male bonding that comes with baseball. There's only, I think, 1 or 2 scenes on a baseball field, but brilliant movie, I think, of recent memory. Such a warm, tender film.
Yeah, and Linklater, being clearly a filmmaker that, has taken his own personal experience and brought that, to bear on those films. Mm-hmm. Even the baseball bits.
That's a great list. There's also Bang the Drum Slowly, I guess, is another one that was a great.
I got to see that. I've never seen it.
Yeah.
There's several I haven't seen. Going further back, I like The Big Leaguer by Robert Aldrich.
You were a film critic, is that right? I mean, that's your sideline in addition to what you're doing?
It's something I've always done as a kind of compulsion, I guess. I started a blog in high school or maybe it was even in junior high. I was watching a lot of international films and trying to wrap my head around all this stuff. It began as like an outgrowth of my own interest in making films and trying to understand what I was seeing and try to hone my taste. And then I just kept writing over the years. I think it's a way to stay sharp and understand what moves you and why it moves you. So I wrote for Slant Magazine for many years, and at this point it's slowed down considerably just because I'm focused on making films, but I don't want to lose touch with writing about films and reacting to them, because I think it's a part of being a thoughtful filmmaker, for me at least, to keep that dialogue going. I do write also for Harvard Film Archive in the program notes, which is less, it's sort of criticism, but it's not evaluative. It's more of a research exercise, but that's all very rewarding for me too.
That's great. I mean, obviously it's a way to inform what you're doing and a way to kind of keep your critical skills sharp, and hopefully then translates to your own writing, so you can challenge yourself and force yourself to be a better writer. I mean, I'm certain that those two things sort of help inform one another.
Absolutely. I mean, I went to school at Emerson, and I was always a bit surprised by the number of peers I had who really hadn't seen many films beyond, the major American canonical films, and sometimes didn't seem to have a great interest in doing that. I think it's important to really watch everything, as much as you can, in as many different genres and styles as you can, because it's always going to just enrich what you want to do. It's good to be challenged and force yourself out of your comfort zone with filmmaking and with everything, really. I know I made a movie that's very much my comfort zone, but it's informed by aesthetic ideas that are from other films that maybe were outside my comfort zone when I first encountered them.
Right. Well, it's that, you talked about it when the film was playing, at Cannes. There's a process of discovery, and you don't necessarily need or even want to know something about the subject, although you can. But, if you just give yourself over the story and to the filmmaker, you can learn something about a place or a people or a part of the world that you know nothing about. And that's kind of the beauty of art films.
Was there a film that kind of inspired the style of this, or again the approach, because it is a non-classical approach to story structure? I don't know how to put it another way, but it really has a float to it, which recreates the sense of baseball, or the sense of playing or being on the field, or kind of how time moves. But was there a film that was kind of your touchstone as you kind of went?
There was never one, but there were filmmakers for sure. Wiseman being one of them, Sai being one of them. I was actually watching a lot of Miklos Jancho films, the Hungarian director, around the time I was conceiving of how to shoot this film. And I love the way he frames large groups of people in motion and with their own very peculiar language. So I was watching a lot of that, and then there's one that really informed, I think, it was the key to the film in a way. It was like a eureka moment when I watched it and fell in love with it. It's this Chinese film called Oxhide 2 by Liu Jiayin, correctly, but she made it with her family. It's about the preparation of a meal in her family home with her mother and father. They're making dumplings. The whole film is structured around this table, and it moves periodically like around the table in a circular motion. And once it's completed the circle and they're eating dinner, the film is over. And I liked the idea of just using a structure like that, like the preparation and consumption of a meal, as a way to structure a story and create all this sideline detail and behavioral detail that, like the action is just what it just provides the engine for the film, and then it's all this stuff that you discover along the way that is what you're really there for. That I think was hugely influential. Just it's a film made in very long takes, very very durational and carefully composed. So Eephus is quite different in certain ways, but I think just on a fundamental level, I was trying to do something like that.
In terms of the visual language of the film, you're also a cinematographer. You've worked with other filmmakers, directors, helping to bring their vision to life. How did you approach, your choice of cinematographer, their, thoughts and about how to capture a game, which takes place over a big field, but also have these intimate moments?
Yeah, I was admittedly a bit nervous about working with a cinematographer because I've shot many films at this point, and I've always kind of, with short films I've made in the past, I've also manned the camera, and I've sort of by default been the cinematographer for those as well. But I realized, thankfully, that there were just too many people to manage on this production, too many cast members and crew members. And I needed to be alert, and thinking about what light I needed to use or what lens I needed to use was just going to be too many things to process. So I'm so glad I had that eureka moment and went with Greg Tango as my DP. Greg is a friend from college, and I hadn't worked much with him, but he came highly recommended from some of my other close friends. He works in New York and hadn't actually shot a feature yet, but was very interested to do so. And we discussed the film, and I discussed some visual reference points, and it just felt right. I felt like he grasped what the movie was about. He's played some baseball in his life, but isn't as big a fan as I am. But he certainly understood what I was trying to capture, and we did the storyboarding process with him was just so rewarding. We spent so much time going over every single shot that by the time we reached set and production, I mean, we were kind of completely simpatico. We knew what we wanted to capture, and I felt very confident going in that he certainly had the technical chops to achieve what we needed to achieve. And yeah, he did have some of his own reference points, especially in terms of coloring and image texture, and what lenses he wanted to use that he'd used prior in certain other films that he'd shot. He even had he came up with this great idea for how we would shoot the twilight scenes in the film, which was inspired by Mad Max Fury Road, of all things. They had a certain color process whereby they overexposed by 2 stops and then added a LUT and got this amazing dim blue look so we actually shot those scenes in the daytime whenever it was overcast.
Okay.
It's sort of like
I was going to ask, because continuity
night.
Could have been a bitch.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, it was
the sun, the day part of the day it's so important.
Oh yeah. It was, continuity was a bitch, and every night we had to remake the schedule essentially because we kept dealing with rain and other weather factors. So we had a great schedule at the beginning, and then that shifted the minute we got 3 straight days of rain, So I have to shout out Mike Basta, who was also my co-writer and also AD'd the film, for just rolling with the punches and having to always figure out a solution for how we get the next day done without sacrificing the continuity.
What did you do? I mean, you didn't really have a rain set. I mean, you're outdoors the whole time when you had 3 days of rain. What was your pivot?
We had to not shoot those days, and then figure out what to do after that. And eventually it reached a point where if we knew we were getting rain, we were looking at hour by hour forecasts and saying, okay, we need to salvage these 3 or 4 hours of sun when it peaks out in the middle of the afternoon or something, because we need to get these scenes. And then there were times where we just kind of had to shoot 6 or 7 days in a row and take our off days on rain days. It was a really grueling shoot in certain ways, and I'm so happy that I had such a supportive and flexible team behind me for it. But everyone was in it together. I mean, when it rained, we would have the cast and crew would be out there with rakes and shovels, like making sure the field was ready to shoot on.
Yeah, exactly.
They were the ground
it's
crew.
The field's muddy. We can't shoot. It's not going to match.
Yeah. But we sort of anticipated those things and said, okay, let's shoot dugout scenes the day that it's overcast, or we'll shoot. There were kind of that we sort of conceived of like the dugout and the press box as like the interior locations in the film to some extent.
Right. We can shoot close-ups where we're not seeing the full field, or still, but still a huge challenge because what inning is this? And that's going to be what time of day and what light quality we need, for this little bit.
Yeah. No, it's a massive challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of created a sort of a baseball camp for a month for a bunch of adults.
Yeah. With a camera.
What was the response for them when they got to see the movie? I mean, it must have been like, they must have blown their mind.
Yeah, it actually did. One of my actors the other night said in a Q&A, he thought, I think he's like, most of us thought we were making like a Caddyshack or something. I think some of them said, oh, we're making the adult Sandlot. I think they were expecting something like lighthearted, a romp. I mean, it is that, but they didn't necessarily anticipate where the film goes and the kind of emotional depth of it. And the melancholy. So I think a lot of people on the team were very, very surprised and moved to see what it became. And I don't think a lot of them had been in a film like this before. So I'm really glad to have worked with all these people because there was a purity to it. And I think we'll continue to work with these people in the future. So that's what it's for me, that's what it's all about. It's like creating a independent film family, and you have people that you love to work with, and you just go back to the same well, and you try to create that magic again.
You bet. Do you anticipate doing another baseball movie, or do you have other
or another New England film? I guess maybe.
Certainly a New England film or two or three. It's the region that, for better or worse, just sits in my gut and I have to think about all the time. I don't live there anymore, but it's where I'm from. It's the bedrock. So I do have two productions I'm trying to get off the ground, both set in New England, but not baseball related. Maybe someday I'll go back to it, but I don't want to get pigeonholed as like the baseball guy.
Yeah. But again, it's a baseball movie, but it's not a baseball movie. It's really beyond that, and it does go deep, and it takes you into kind of the character of the Northeast and of these men trying to sort of find their way in the world, and it asks a lot of big questions.
Well, thank you. We try to ask the big questions without looking like we're asking them. I don't want it to be ostentatious or pretentious or anything.
Well,
like
God
that.
bless you.
I want it to,
right? He's able to kind of
exactly. I wanted to adopt the same kind of conversational vibe of like Yogi Berra or Bill Lee himself, who having just spent a week with him, this guy arrives at such profundities just through casual conversation. It's really amazing. You ask him about the film, he won't just tell you about the film. He'll find an anecdote from 1974 and weave it back into his take on the film. It's wild to experience, to listen to that. Yeah.
Well, Greg, as a baseball person, because again, this speaks so directly to you in terms of kind of knowing the game as you do. It must have kind of touched something deep in you as well.
Yeah, well, look, again, it's I don't think it's fair to pigeon it as to pigeonhole it.
It's not just a baseball movie, but for those people,
and at some level, it's a very American film, and I think it's maybe informed. And when you talk about writing it during the period of COVID, some of the darkness of that period comes through, and yet there's also that hope that as much as things are disappearing in our lives, that we can still find ways of reclaiming them and bringing them out, and a passage of time. I guess, the handing over from the older players to the younger players. So there's a lot to chew on in the movie, and I encourage everybody to come see it because, again, it's not about baseball.
Yeah, I think it's really an ode to the effort required to maintain these kind of connections in our lives, these group connections, because life is so full of distractions and so full of responsibilities. I mean, to make sure that we make time for doing what we love and doing it with people we love, like sometimes it's a challenge. Yeah. The world moves too fast and everyone needs to find a way to make money. So, but at the same time, you got to make sure.
Look, look, it's coming around at a fairly, divided time in our society. And is baseball something that unites us, or is, at the end of the day, are these community things something that unites us? Players aren't talking in politics. And they may have very different political beliefs or religious beliefs or all kinds of other beliefs, but they can unite, in this league, and their belief in the league and the importance of the league. And that's, I think that's something that is very important right now.
There's a great book called Bowling Alone by Robert B. Putnam.
And which is just had a documentary called Join or Die.
Exactly.
So about the importance of social fabric, based on the book.
Yeah. And this is a book I didn't discover until after making the film.
Yes, but now it informed your being.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, talk about Bowling Alone. Just if you want,
Well, I'm only making my way through it.
Okay.
But he discusses. It's a sociological study of America in the last 40. I mean, it's really the last 100 years, really, but specifically focused on the last 30, 40 years, and how there's been a decline in civic institutions and civic clubs, and how that he believes that has led to some of the political division in our country. and just the declining spaces for us to, inhabit with people who might share different thoughts.
Yeah, social media is designed to sort of condense our lives because we get this reinforcement of opinions that we share, and we're not exposed to other people and other ideas. And these institutions, bring us back. And so, we may have difference of opinions, but, there's a lot that we share as well. And if we can remember, what we share and not focus on what divides us, it's going to hold us together. I think, you can go back to de Tocqueville if you want to talk about that kind of, what makes democracy in America different from what he observed.
Yeah, just get off the computer and go have some fun. That's what it comes down to. Just go run around in a park.
Find a place where you don't have your phone out.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we chose the 90s too. It's like nobody had a phone.
Yeah, I love that. I love the old cars. I love that there was no phone. I love that because it really felt out of time and in time. But it just it added to that sense of everyone just being present. So you're opening in New York now, and then you're opening in LA next, and then what's the wide release?
Yeah, New York this week.
That's March 7th in New York.
March 7th, yes. March 14th in LA and Boston, and Chicago the week after that. And along the way, it's opening in a whole number of theaters in many different cities and small towns across America. It's a limited release, but it's kind of growing, and hopefully if it does well here in New York, it'll grow even more. But yeah, check out eephusfilm.com, and you can kind of pay attention see if it's coming to you.
All right, eephusfilm.com, we got that. Being distributed by Music Vox Films. You can also check their website probably for updates. And hopefully you're going to be in New York this weekend. You're coming to, well, you live in Los Angeles, but you'll be in LA for the opening weekend Q&A on March 14th, with March 13th, 14th, 15th.
I'll actually be in Boston that weekend, but I will be.
Some other people from the film will be there for Q&A at the LA screenings.
I'll be there in the week leading up to it, though. There's a couple preview screenings before the 14th, so check your local listings.
Okay, and look for it and find it and go out and enjoy it. Carson Lund, thank you very much for joining us on Inside
Carson,
the Arthouse.
Great to have you here. Thanks for talking about this. It's really cool.
Appreciate it. This has been great. Thank you.
And we'll see you all inside the Arthouse.
Our show is produced by Raphael Sparge with on-site producer Norrin Dickerson. Supervising producers are Miles McCreary and Thomas Cassetta. Our show is edited by Gabriel Lemley and mixed by Thomas Cassetta. Our musical theme was composed by Isabel Engman and Gerardo Garcia Jr. Marketing by Gabriel Lemley. Show graphics by Jenna DeAngelis and show open edited by Rick Pratt. Filmed at the historic Lemley Royal Theater in Los Angeles, California. See you next time on Inside the Arthouse. If you like today's show, please consider subscribing to our channel to hear more on Inside the Arthouse.